Hello and welcome to Raw Chatter. It is your host, Vicky Midwood, speaking, and I have got an amazing guest with me today. Her name is Debs, and she is a lived experience mental health consultant and facilitator, and she has got one hell of a story. Now, we're not going to go through all of Debs' story today, although it's a shame because we could do and we should do at some point because it is bloody amazing. But we are going to touch on a particularly powerful and important topic that is part of her story throughout, and that's about labels. But before we get into the specific topic, I would love you, Debs, to introduce yourself to our listeners and just help them to understand how you became a lived-in experience mental health consultant.
Yeah, well, it was by accident, Rick, I suppose. I've been in the mental health system since I was a child, from the age of 8, and I reached a crisis point, having been given many labels, and some that they said, oh, we think we've mislabeled you, you might be something else, but they never took those labels back off me. They just added more to me. And I felt I'd lost my identity. I felt that I was just a service user and nothing else. And that overtook the whole of me. And it wasn't until I started to recover. Now, when I talk about recovery in mental health, I don't mean recovered. No. Recover, in my mind, is living a life worth living. So I still have all the labels, I still have all the side effects and all the issues that come with those labels, but I found a life worth living that I can manage my labels rather than them managing me.
I love that. You can manage your labels. Brilliant. So take us back, because 8 years old to be part of the whole mental health system, was that the age you were given your first label? And if it was, what was that label?
Well, when I was 8, which is quite a few years ago now, there wasn't a mental health system. It was a doctor with a room in his house. And the first label I was given was bad nerves. Now, if I was to present today with the same issues, I would be classed as having panic attacks.
Right. So
which I did get very nervous further on down the line, but then it was bad nerves, which was the same label my mum had, who was a domestic violence victim.
Right. So when you went to see this guy in his house and what have you, who kind of instigated that? Was it your mum? Was it you that wanted to go and see somebody because you didn't know why you were feeling? How did that happen in the first place?
I woke up and I didn't feel well at all. I just couldn't stop shaking. I couldn't stop crying. I was in such a state that my mum had to take me because I couldn't do anything else.
Right.
And the GP saw me and said, oh, you bad nerves, and prescribed some medication that knocked me out for days.
Wow.
I don't know what medication it was, but it just knocked me out. So I know my mum didn't use it very often, only when I was really bad.
And did that affect the whole of your childhood then, Debs? That highly sensitive, nervous reaction to stuff?
Well, I think I'd been affected long before that. They were again, that some of the other labels that I've been given. I think growing up, because we didn't know very much about mental health and how the brain works, and there was very little known about understanding around certain conditions. So it was very much just bumbling along, I suppose.
Yeah.
And to me, that was normal because I grew up with it. I didn't know any different. It's just a case of you go with what you know because you don't know any different. And to me, how I was feeling was normal up to what other people were. I knew they didn't have quite as many negative feelings as what I did, but we just got by, and nobody spoke about issues back then. It wasn't such a talkative issue as what it is nowadays.
And that was part of the problem, wasn't it? People didn't discuss what was going on. It was very much behind closed doors, and kind of we were almost ashamed or embarrassed to say if there was any kind of issue that was not physical, because you couldn't really discuss it and you didn't really know what you were talking about. So And then, so tell us, so that was when you were 8, and then what happened further on down the line, and this collection of labels? What was the next one? So you got bad nerves. What else?
Well, I was sort of in my 30s when I started getting them all thrown at me.
Right.
And, you know, it was like every time I went to see the psychiatrist, I'd got another label attached to me. And some of them made sense. And I think the thing with labels is, for some people, they're really beneficial and they can be really helpful because they can help you to understand why you are, why you do what you do, how you feel, how things work. But for other people, it's like a milestone around the neck. And they can almost become that label. Now, right. I had already become the label of a service user. That was my main label. I was a service user of the mental health system. Now, the mental health system wasn't in place when I first started accessing.
What does, just to help people listening who don't really know anything about the mental health system, maybe because they've just never been a part of it, or they're just learning about it, but they don't really understand it. So once you get into kind of the system and you're under the care of a were you under the care of a psychotherapist or a psychologist? What
I
were
was
you
under psychologist and psychiatry.
Right. So that's kind of what we class as the mental health system, isn't it? There's psychology, there's psychiatry, and you have to be referred by your GP to go and see one of these specialists.
Yes.
So by the time you were in your 30s and you got different labels and you were somebody who was already in the mental health system, what did that kind of mean, do you think, in terms of how you were treated by the people who were treating you?
I think I became a statistic.
Right.
I became a patient number. I became that service user.
Right.
And that was the milestone around my neck, with all these labels jangling from the service user label. And I wasn't ever treated as a whole person. I wasn't ever treated as, you know, Debs. And I try and use the term a lot, hi, I'm Debs, because I want people to see me rather than my labels. Because for all my life, I've felt invisible other than being a service user.
Right.
And
so give us a clue, some of the labels that you've had that have been weighing you down.
Bipolar, depressive disorder, anxiety disorder, personality disorder, autistic. Well, it was Asperger's what they did it, but they've changed that label now to general autistic. And paranoia.
Right. And so when people were talking about you, or even at you rather than to you, they were tending to refer to those labels as opposed to Debs, who has an issue with autism, or who has an issue with manic depression, or it was like, oh, Debs, she's the manic depressive. Oh, Debs, she's the autistic.
Yes.
And then suddenly you become the label, and that actually can become your identity, can't it?
Yeah.
And do you think it was for you?
Yeah, because if you told that for as long as I was in the system, I mean, I was in the system 40 years. And if you told that, and if that's all you're ever seen as, then that's what you will become. And that's what I did become. You know, I forgot the label of mum and partner and sister and auntie and grandma. Those labels didn't ever seem to be part of my life. It was always service user. It was always, you know, this is who Debs is. This is, well, I weren't even Debs. I weren't, you know, I was just a service user. And I've been out of services now for about 8.5 years. And I still struggle to not call myself a service user. Even though I'm not.
It's so ingrained.
Yeah. I mean, it's like somebody coming along when I got, it's my 4th wedding anniversary tomorrow. You know, when you change your name, your surname, you initially you remember it, but then when you sort of go down the line and you relax a bit, you revert back to your old name, don't you? And that's what I'm doing with service user, the service user label. I keep sort of, oh, I'm a service user. No, you're not. You know, and it's almost like I have to correct myself.
Do you feel that there's a part of you, and perhaps for other people as well, where there's some kind of security in knowing that whatever it is that you're feeling and dealing with has got a label, has got a name, and it is something that you can almost become attached to, and it feels safe? Does that make sense?
It does. And I think for some people it can do that. I know certainly with people around autism, or if they're diagnosed with ADHD, they feel reassured
Yeah.
that the thoughts they were thinking, the actions that they were doing. And I suppose with the autism, now I didn't get the autism till quite late,
Right.
because the psychiatrist said there were lots of people who were misdiagnosed,
Correct.
and they thought people were more likely to be autistic or ADHD. But they didn't take those other labels off me. They just give me another one.
Right.
And it was
How,
like,
I'm just going to stop you there. How could they have taken those labels off you, do you think?
well, they could have said, actually, you're not this anymore. You're this.
Right. Or we got it wrong.
Yeah. Well, they wouldn't ever say that though.
No, but this is the point, isn't it? That
Yeah.
we're trying to help people to understand that these services, and your GP falls within that, because they're the first port of call, if you like.
Yeah.
We have to understand, and I think this is something that we need to help people to hear more often, is that there's this idea that if you're a GP or a psychiatrist or a psychotherapist, that somehow you know everything about everything.
Yeah.
And what we know, and me as a health coach who specializes with helping people with a lot of eating disorders, who have obviously been under psychotherapists and psychiatrists as well in the past, and having been in the system and now work with the system, we know they're just human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And they're only as good as the training that they had, and they're only as up to date and educated and knowledgeable as the research that they choose to do for themselves. And what we do know is we're learning so much more about the brain and about the body, that what we thought was correct and true years ago is no longer. Not because it was necessarily wrong.
Yeah.
It's just that we didn't have the ability and the skills to be able to look at the brain and understand people in the way that we're able to do that now. And therefore, what we thought was right actually now is not.
Yeah.
But we've got a massive discrepancy between how long it is since people were trained, whether they keep up to date with current research, and how much they tell themselves that they are specialists in this one particular area. And so I think what we need to understand is it's very difficult for anybody to say, hey, I was wrong. Don't matter who you are, what profession you're in. But if you can be a professional and say, well, actually, at the time, that was the right diagnosis, but we know more now than we ever did back then. And it transpires that now actually it's this, not that. I think that would be something that would help patients feel more trusting. It's a real human being, isn't it?
Yeah.
But also recognize that the person who is looking after them actually does care, because they're explaining to them that it's not this, it's that. But the way that you feel and what's happening in your life is still valid. And just because it's not this thing anymore and it's got this name and this label doesn't change the fact that your experience of it is very valid. And we've got to look at you as a person. So is that what you're helping people to do?
Well, yes and no. I mean, the psychiatrist, when I was at rock bottom, I was going through a lot of really personal issues, and the psychiatrist, in his wisdom, said to me, you're always going to be ill, you're always going to be medicated, and you'll never work again. Now, I looked up to him because he was the expert. He had the answer to my illness. At that point in time, I was on 21 tablets a day. Wow. I was often bedbound because of the medication and the illnesses, and I've been medically retired from my last job. So I believed every word he said. And because of that, I felt I'd got a terminal life sentence, which I didn't want to live with. So I ended up taking an overdose. And I woke up in hospital opposite a lady who was dying of cancer. She had no time for me whatsoever because she's clinging to her life and she sees me willingly giving mine away. And they were saying, the nurses and this cancer patient were saying really vile stuff to me. The bed should be for somebody who deserves it. And I was attention seeking, you know, and I was wasting everybody's time. What people didn't understand was I was jealous of that dying cancer patient because she was getting an end to her suffering. People didn't see what I was going through as suffering.
Right, because they didn't understand it.
No, and I think that's the issue with mental health is people often think, oh, I'm a bit fed up, and they think that's mental health. You know, and I say to people, what would you do if you won lottery? Oh, I'd go on holiday, I'd do this, I'd buy this, I'd buy that. And I says, well, if you've got mental illness, it won't make any difference to your life whatsoever. Yeah. And I think it's trying to help people to understand what it feels like to be in the depth of mental illness, you know, to be so far gone that suicide is the answer.
Right. And
that's the only answer.
And I think that this is such an important topic to pick up on, because for a lot of people, that does seem like it is the only way out.
Yeah.
But the powerful thing that you said was, and it was a sentence which people may have missed it, so I'm going to repeat it, is you said you didn't want that life for yourself and you were going to take them pills. But oftentimes that very same sentence can be the thing that pulls people out of it and helps them to decide that they're going to try a different way.
Yeah.
So you obviously didn't succeed because you're here.
Yeah.
So, and you said that you've been out of the system now for 8 years. And just, I can imagine, because my mum had a label of bipolar disorder and wasn't able to kind of fully function in her latter years at all. And part of that, a lot of that, was to do with the side effects of the medication that she was taking. And a lot of people thought she had Parkinson's because she would permanently shake.
Yeah.
And what she would say is that, like you, she believed everything she was told by the psychiatrists and by the people that were looking after her. Because if you don't know, well, you don't know, do you? So you look at these people as being experts. So to get out of that system, there was no way my mum could ever have gotten out of that system, because she'd kind of created the identity and was going along with it, and she didn't have the mental resilience or the belief that there was a different way. So how heck did Debs get out of that mental health system and get off? I'm assuming you're not taking 21 tablets now.
No, I've been medication free for nearly 11 years now, so I don't take any well, I'm on HRT for the menopause,
right.
But other than that, I don't have any medication. Well, part of being discharged from hospital was that I had to go to psychology.
Yeah.
So whilst I was sat in the waiting room, I saw a leaflet, Art for Wellbeing. Never done art before. I don't know why I picked the leaflet up, but I picked the leaflet up. When I went in for the assessment, I said, what do you think about this? He didn't know a great deal about it, but he said, just give him a ring. Right. There was a taster session, come along, 5-10 minutes from my house. My friend dropped me off and then drove off and left me there. So I couldn't go back home. And I sat down to the art class, and that's the day my life changed. And that's when I started thinking, I mean, the first medication I stopped taking was sleeping pills.
Right, because, that's a big one to start with.
Yeah, well, when I woke up through the night, I'd get my drawing pad out and I'd start sketching. I didn't put the light on, so I didn't know what I was sketching. I was just sketching things. So the next morning, it could have been like a mass squiggle in the middle of the page, you know, but it was just a case of getting things down out of my head. type of thing.
Right.
And then, I mean, it took me just over a year to come off all the medications, and I had to reduce it, then wait 6 weeks and start on the next.
So you
medication.
just to reiterate that you were doing that with supervision. You weren't doing that.
Oh yeah, I did it. I mean, initially the psychiatrist didn't want me to,
Right.
but I said, well, I'm going to do it anyway, with or without you. So he thought, we'll do it together. So we did do it together.
Brilliant.
And I think the annoyance of the psychiatrist telling me that that was the best my life was going to get, when I had so many personal issues going on, I felt like I was on the edge of a cliff and he pushed me over. So I thought, I need to tell people that they're not the experts. We're experts in ourselves. You know, you can go to as many universities and get as many degrees and letters and numbers before and after your name. You can never learn what it's like to be in my shoes. No. Only I can do that. And we need to work together with these who've got the knowledge of the degrees and the experts of the diagnosis to find out what it's like to be me, to find out how it works for me. And I think another sort of, because I've had lots of like light bulb moments throughout my journey, and another one was because I started doing the painting. I mean, I'd sold over 100 paintings before I'd call myself an artist, because the service user label was so entrenched on me, I couldn't possibly be an artist.
Right.
You know, so it was like, oh gosh, what do I do here? And I was doing some painting one day, and somebody came up to me and goes, oh, wow, that's a great painting. It's really helped you find yourself, hasn't it? And it was like a light bulb. And I thought, yeah, because with what I had going on at that point in time, alarm bells should have been going off with those who were caring for me, because it wasn't just mental health labels. There was a heck of a lot going off in my life. I mean, I lost my mum, which was the absolute worst thing in my life. She was my best friend. She was my mum. You know, we'd not had the best relationship as children, you know, when I was a child, but we developed one as we got older, and we got really close. We used to holiday together. We worked together, you know, so it was an absolute loss when she'd gone. Then a few months after that, I found out my ex-husband was a paedophile who has potentially done things to my own children.
Oh, so, my goodness, that's a hell of a thing to be able to even think about trying to process.
That's the thing. I mean, alarm bells should have been going off with the psychiatrist and the psychologist, but they didn't, because they only tracked my labels.
Right.
They didn't look at the bigger picture. So it's almost like putting a sticking plaster over a broken leg and expecting it to heal. Yeah. It would never have healed. No. With what I was going through, nothing, no amount of tablets could have numbed me anymore.
Yeah.
From what life was throwing at me at that point in time. And it was really, because people say, why did art work? And I said, well, it helped me find myself. I've always had a racing track brain, and I think that's, well, two of my labels, it could be that. So one is bipolar and one is autism. And it's just constantly like 1,000 miles an hour. But to me, that's normal. I didn't know any different.
Yeah.
And even with medication, it subdued it, but it was still a racing track.
Right.
They are allowed it to stop.
Right. So that gave you a reprieve, didn't it? Yeah.
Well, it did two things. So one, it made me think, oh, it was there all along. Yeah. And then two, it allowed me to control my illness. So I'm like, oh, I want this to stop some more. I'll do some more painting. I'll do some more things that focus on something other than just everyday life. And I use lots of analogies when I do talks, and I use a coffee shop analogy for this particular one. When you go into a coffee shop and you go in, you stand in the queue, you're waiting to get served, and they fire the coffee machine up, and it makes a right loud hissing kind of sound. And you sort of think, oh, gosh, that's annoying. And you get served, you go and you sit down, and you start talking to your friends. And you don't notice it again until it stops. And then you think, oh, yeah, that was quite noisy. Mm-hmm. That's what art did to me. It allowed my brain to stop and to sort of heal, to evaluate itself. So although I still had the psychiatrist and psychologist interventions, I was in control of my illness at that point, and I was telling them, this is what I want to try. And
Brilliant.
sometimes they went with it and sometimes they didn't. They were like, no, that won't work. And I said, well, I want to try it anyway. And I think they knew at that point that I was willing to try it despite what they
said.
Yeah, because I'd had 40 years of them trying to treat me and it hadn't worked.
Yeah.
I hadn't ever felt any better. I mean, there were moments where I felt, yeah, I'm okay, I'm managing this, but there weren't any periods where everything was okay and I was feeling like, I mean, I use the term thriving, not just surviving, because for most of my life I've survived. I've just got by, whereas now I feel like I'm thriving, and I want other people to thrive. I want other people to feel that they're not just winging it. They're not just getting by.
And I think a lot of people just do feel like they're going through the same motions day in, day out, with the same repetitive thoughts, with the same repetitive behaviors and feelings, and recognizing that there can be a different way and there is a different way. But oftentimes nobody actually helps them to see what the alternatives might be. So for you, because I'm a great believer in the power of the universe, and when you said you don't know what made you pick up that leaflet, well, something bigger than you did, because
absolutely.
It was the first step on your path to self-discovery and therefore self-healing. And this is, I think, one of the things that you've recognized is that tablets don't heal. As you said, they're like a sticking plaster on a broken leg. They might help you manage the symptoms and to feel okay, but they didn't give you what you were hoping for, which was to feel some kind of joy in life and the ability to actually thrive and know who hell is Debs. And so now I think it's fair to say that you know a lot more about who Debs is, what makes her tick, what she enjoys, what makes her feel good. And what would you say is the overriding message that you want to give to people who perhaps are in the midst of the place where you were, where they're on a lot of medication and they can't see a way out? Do you have any kind of tips or suggestions for how that they may be able to see things differently?
Well, I'm a real advocate now of what they call social prescribing.
Right.
I hate the terminology, but I love the ethos of it. So social prescribing is where they use creativity to help with your well-being. So instead of you might need to have tablets as well. And I don't advocate no tablets at all, because sometimes people do need them, but I think have the least amount of tablets for the shortest amount of time should be the mantra, certainly on mental health medication.
We're behind you with that.
But it's like doing an art class in the community, doing cricket, football, rock climbing, knitting, singing, dancing. And the beauty of creativity is that it has no age barriers. It's not sexist, it's not racist, it's not homophobic. It doesn't. Language isn't a barrier. It's just open to anybody and everybody. And there's something out there for everybody. It's just finding what's your niche. I never knew I could draw or paint. My children used to take the mickey out of me when we play quick on the draw. My drawings were that horrendous. Now, I wouldn't say I were a good drawer now, but we don't play it anymore. I paint. I find paint and the freedom of paint my thing. But it's just try things. It's just look for things. And I think one of the most important things to say to people is take things one tiny step at a time. When I was really ill and I was stuck in bed and my children were coming home from school, not knowing what state I was going to be in, then I made a pact to get up every day. Right. So I got up every day, and I did that for several days. And then it was get up and get washed every day. So then
you added on one extra thing when you've been doing the getting out of bed, because that was the first step.
It's like me saying to you, right, go run a marathon. I mean, I don't know if you do run marathons or not, but if somebody said to me, go run a marathon, I'd say, on your bike. Whereas if somebody said, let's go walk to Bottom of Path, That's
You
doable.
can do that.
But
Exactly.
it's doing it in small chunks that you feel able and capable of doing. And I mean, it's not to say that sometimes you might have blips, you might have days where you can't, but it's accepting, you know, it's just a blip. So long as you don't stay in that position.
Right. And that's the key, isn't it?
It
And
is.
not allowing one day to become two, to become
Yes.
three. And then
Yeah.
it's really hard then to start again from scratch, because it feels like,
Yeah.
well, I've already done this and I didn't do it so well.
Yeah.
And so being kind to yourself is one of the key things, isn't it? And
Yeah.
and as you say, making a pact with yourself, making a promise to yourself
Yeah.
that you're going to do it, not just for your kids, although that's a bloody great motivator.
Yeah.
But for you, because you do
I
deserve
don't
it.
know. Because at that time, I didn't think I deserved it. You know, I mean, I'd had 36 years of men telling me how useless, worthless, and everything were my fault. So I don't think I could have done it for me at that point in time.
So you needed the incentive of doing it for your kids.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter what the incentive is.
No, absolutely not. As long as you do it.
It gives you that little kick up the butt to just take that very first step. Because once you take that first step, it's not as hard, is it, then to take the second one?
And I think it's as well, it's, you know, if you do have a bad day, it doesn't take you as long to get back to where you were as what it had done the first time. And again, using analogies, I like to use a car analogy. So for most of my life, somebody else has always had the driving seat, be that my parents, be that my ex-husband, be that the mental health professionals. They've always said where I needed to go, and I've conformed, because that's what you had to do with mental health services. You had to do what they say, or you were labelled a troublemaker.
Yeah.
So I conformed to fit in with the system, and now I'm in that driving seat. So when you're in the driving seat, you sit in the car and you see through a great big windscreen, because that's where you're going. Hopefully it's clean and you know you can see fully where you're going. Occasionally, you need to look through your rear view mirror just to see if there's anything behind you. So that's not forgetting your past. It's not forgetting, you know, what shaped you into the person you are now. But it's not staying there. It's not dwelling there. Because if you stare through your rear view mirror, you will crash.
You will.
Without a shadow of a doubt, you will crash. You need to get looking back through that windscreen. And when you're driving, occasionally, you need to reverse. So sometimes you might need to revisit something. Sometimes, you know, but you don't stay there forever. Because again, if you stay in reverse, you will drive. You will crash. Occasionally, you need to go into a car park and stop your car. You need to give your car a break. You need to give yourself a break. You know, so it's accepting that your journey is going to be forwards, backwards, sideways, roundways, stopping, relaxing, treasuring the more. You know, it's about accepting that we're human. We do make mistakes. We can make mistakes, and it's okay to make mistakes. It's our way of learning. I mean, I don't know about you, but I learn far more from my mistakes than what I do when it goes right, because when it goes right, you just move on.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, this is something that, you know, we're brought up in a school system that teaches us that mistakes are bad, and that failure is something that we should avoid at all costs. And that is so detrimental to our mental health, because if you you know, go completely the opposite and look at anybody who is successful in business, for example, right? They've gotten that successful because they've failed a shed load of times.
Yeah.
Right? And their mantra is fail fast and fail often.
Yeah.
Right. And yet, when we're at school and when we're kids, we're taught that failure is a bad thing. But the only way that we can learn is through making mistakes, because that's when we remember stuff. It's how we then look for a different path, because that one didn't work. And, you know, what I try and help people to just say when I'm working with them is just say, embrace failure, because it's only feedback. Failure is just feedback. It's like, okay, so you did that didn't work. So now you know not to do that again. So now go over here and try this. Now go over there and try that. And the more you can change the interpretation of certain words and how we use them and how we look at them, the easier it is then to help ourselves to feel more comfortable with doing the stuff that perhaps previously we told ourselves or somebody else told us was bad or wrong or naughty or all of that crap, which makes us feel less than, not good enough, always second guessing ourselves, etc., etc. So how do people find you if they want your help as a lived experienced mental health consultant, or as just somebody that, you know, maybe they've listened to what you've had to say and they want to perhaps contact you personally, or just maybe ask a little bit more about some of the stuff that we've talked about today? How do people get in touch with you, Debs?
My website is called The Debs Effect. And I called it that because people said I had this effect on them. And initially I wanted somewhere to put all my paintings online because people were asking to look. And I've just kept it as that because people still say I have this effect on them. So just look me up on The Debs Effect. My email is debs@thedebseffect.co.uk. So it's easy.
Excellent. And on the website, they can just contact you by email or whatever. So that's fantastic.
Absolutely.
Do you have any little final nugget that you would like to leave our listeners with, just to round up what we've been talking about, or anything else that you'd like to say to them?
Yeah, well, it's about them finding themselves. It's about them having their identity and looking at the whole of them, not just a selected part of them, which the NHS can do. You know, if you suffer from heart attacks, you'll be down the cardiac route, so you'll be a cardiac patient. You know, it's looking at the whole of you. It's looking at the whole of your life and embracing that. Whatever labels, whatever diagnosis, whatever titles you have bestowed upon you, you are unique. And you are the only one who is the expert in you. And if you do need to go into services, whatever, whether it's mental health or any other, you know that expert who sat opposite you is not the expert of you. He's only an expert of a condition or a label. And you need to work together to find the right solution. It's got to be an holistic approach. We've got to look at everybody holistically. We can't be selective because people aren't selective. People are made up of many different things. And, you know, I'm really proud to say, hello, my name is Debs. I'm an artist. I'm a mum. I'm a wife. I'm a sister. You know, I'm lots of things. I'm not just a service user anymore.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much, Debs. It's been an absolute delight. And for those of you who are listening, if you have enjoyed what we have had to share today, please do hit that subscribe button. And if you think anything that we've covered is going to be helpful to somebody that you know, please let them know about the podcast so that they can listen to it as well. Once again, thank you for listening. Remember, folks, you only have one life, as far as we know. We only have one body. Look after it, and it will look after you. Take care. Bye-bye now.
Thanks.